This is Rural Health Leadership Radio.
Episode 152, a conversation with Knesha Rose-Davison, Health Communications Director at AgriSafe.
We've known farming is a tough occupation, but they have some of the most hardest working, most dedicated people.
Welcome to the Rural Health Leadership Radio with your host, Dr. Bill Oxier. Each week, Dr. Oxier has a conversation with a different rural health leader to discuss what's working and what's not working in rural health, along with other topics of interest to rural health leaders. Rural Health Leadership Radio's goal is to improve health in rural America by providing a simple, no-cost means to share information and connect rural health leaders from around the country. And now, here's Dr. Oxier with today's guest.
Hi, everybody. I am your host, Dr. Bill Oxier. Welcome to Rural Health Leadership Radio. I'd like to thank the Dynamic Leadership Academy for Rural Health for underwriting the cost of today's episode. But more importantly, I want to thank today's guest, Knesha Rose-Davison, for taking time out of her busy schedule to have a conversation with us today. Welcome to Rural Health Leadership Radio, Knesha.
Hi, thanks, Bill. I'm really excited to be here and talk with you today.
Well, so am I. Knesha is the Health Communications Director at AgriSafe. And instead of me rambling on about you, why don't you tell us about yourself? What's your story? Who is Knesha Rose-Davison?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was actually, I'm a country girl. I was actually born in Arkansas Delta. My grandfather was a sharecropper of soybean and cotton. I have several family members and still who reside in Arkansas who are actually seasonal farm workers or farm hands. And my mother actually returned home after living 25-something years, in Texas and went back home. So she's heavily involved in agriculture herself. So I've just been a lot of places and kind of brought myself back to my ag roots here. I have a public health background. I started in maternal child health, have worked everywhere from maternal child dealing with infant mortality to all the way to the end of the spectrum dealing with seniors living with Alzheimer's dementia and just every health aspect in between there. So now here with AgriSafe, I'm working in ag occupational health. So I've really seen it all. And I like to say I've kind of been from the cradle to the grave dealing with public health.
Yeah, that's great. What very broad experience with a lot of different things in there. So I'm so glad that you're joining with us in a conversation here today. Why did you choose agricultural safety as an occupation?
It kind of found me. I'll be honest. I was actually looking for a little more work health and work-life balance, if you will. Okay. Working kind of for nonprofit voluntary health organizations that were national in scope. I was often traveling a lot and more often on the road than at home. So I was kind of looking to scale back professionally and found a part-time opportunity with the AgriSafe organization. And then we kind of had a boom in programming. And so now I'm back full-time. But it really brought me back to my roots. Again, it's like something I've always kind of been around in terms of agriculture, but I didn't understand all the risk and hazards and nuances of it. So it's been really intriguing, and I've just really learned a lot with the new focus on that.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting since you're focusing on safety in agriculture. I don't know about you, but it seemed like, you just kind of grew up accepting those risks as that was just the norm, not that you could do anything about that. That was just normal.
Yeah, it was a normal type of environment for me. Again, I kind of saw a lot of things, and again, I was a child and in and out of Arkansas. My grandfather actually had a little song for me that talked about how much I would be in town and then out and come back again. So it was like I've always kind of been drawn to the country, and maybe I just wasn't aware of everything that was around me and what those concerns were. And even if they were talked about, I was a young child. So it's interesting to look at it through this lens now. Yeah,
absolutely. So why the focus on rural?
I would say the focus on rural because it's just, again, I've just kind of done a lot of things in public health. And what's so interesting to me with rural is just one, it's just so rich in culture and family and tradition. And while they're, in terms of public health, they deal with everything that everyone else deals with. And on top of that, they deal with shortages in access to care and sometimes lack of resources. But it's still such a resilient and loving community that really comes together and tries to help one another. So I think that sense of community and overcoming really is appealing to me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Knesha, the name of this program is Rural Health Leadership Radio. As you heard there, I emphasized leadership. What is your definition of leadership?
I would say, to begin, it's definitely a willingness to serve, to meet people where they are, not just coming in thinking you know the answer, but seeing what their concerns are and how can you bring resources to that. And I would say leadership from my early public health training is synonymous with advocacy. So okay. I kind of have that fight in me to help those without or to help those achieve the goals that they want to achieve. And then, the usual, having integrity, being loyal, being dedicated to a cause, inspiring others, and definitely making a difference.
Well, I like that you started out with your definition focused on serving. I'm a big advocate of servant leadership, so I very much appreciate that as well as the rest of your definition there. Thanks for sharing that with us.
Mm-hmm.
So,
no problem.
You sent me a press release about some things that were going on at AgriSafe, and that caused me to reach out to you, and here we are talking on the program together. I was hoping that you could give us an overview of the Total Farmer Health Program and the community that you serve, because it seems like AgriSafe is really focusing on health issues these days. So I guess that's another question in and of itself. But can you give us an overview of the Total Farmer Health Program?
Absolutely. AgriSafe is a national nonprofit, and we focus on our kind of tagline, our motto is protecting the people that feed the world. So we have a lot of people who function in the ag, occupational health and safety realm around things like tractor safety. And, it's nothing kind of wrong with, pesticides and chemicals, if you will. But we really look at the health of the person. So again, all the leading indicators for health, and then they're working in a dangerous industry. So Total Farmer Health was our answer to total worker health or workplace wellness. A lot of people who work in agriculture are small family farms, and they don't necessarily have a human resources manager or a safety supervisor unless they're a larger operation coming in and giving them tips and giving them training about their safety. So Total Farmer Health is an approach and a campaign that looks at the occupational hazards as well as the individual, hazards if they're dealing with any disease or chronic illness, any social or mental health components that can impact that farmer, that producer's health and wellness. And so we are actually affiliated with NIOSH and the CDC as a recognized program to really address those health and safety concerns for farmers. And as of recent, in 2019, we've received some funding to really kind of relaunch this and look specifically at mental health concerns.
Yeah, because that's a growing problem in rural America, especially in agriculture.
Yes. Absolutely is. We're just seeing so many forces, if you will, coming against producers in terms of the economy. And again, you need, health care access, health issues, lack of providers. It's just extreme weather. It's everything impacts a farmer, producer's life. And we have to take that into consideration when we're talking about getting an adequate amount of sleep or making sure that you can, rest properly for harvest season, or, it's just so many things that are coming against them all at once. And we have to be able to recognize that and try to provide information to help them alleviate some of those concerns where they can function in a safe and healthy manner. Yeah,
that's great. Thank you for putting that together. It's kind of interesting. When my mom passed away, we were cleaning out the house and we found all these letters that my dad had written home to his mom and dad when he was in World War II. And
wow.
I can't believe how many letters he wrote, but in every letter home to his mom or his dad or his brothers, he was always asking, what's the price of soybeans going? What's corn going for these days? He was always worried about the farm, what was happening with the farm. And, I think some things never change. Can you talk about the uncertainty of the ag economy?
Yeah, absolutely. It's again, we've been seeing stuff in the news daily, if not weekly. AgriSafe has been receiving calls and calls and calls about, mental health and mental health resources and, what's available to help our producers. I'm just going to kind of run a couple of facts that I'm sure our rural health leadership audience are aware of. But the external factors, again, it's just so much that producers deal with that they don't have any control over, like the economy, the price of your row crops, the price of your livestock, extreme weather. We're just seeing so many events from areas flooding that have never flooded before. Right now we're dealing with hurricanes and tornadoes, coming out of the woodwork, just the export trade, so all of these things really have an impact. And what we've seen, actually, a recent report said that USDA reported that between 2011 and 2014, the net income from the ag industry was about $105 billion. And now looking at the 2016, 17, 18 year, the net was about $62 billion. So that's a decrease of 45%.
Wow.
And what's interesting is from this report by CBS News is that, they're still living today and with the cost of today's living, but their income is equivalent to like 15 years ago.
Wow.
And it's very unstable in terms of what we're seeing. And even this year with like the flooding that we've seen in the Midwest and is yet still coming down the Mississippi to other areas, the planting season is shorter. So people are concerned, are they even going to even get their crops in the ground and what yield are they going to have with such a late season? So it's just, chronic stress in terms of the career, but it's rewarding. And you say, if it's so hard, why do they do it? Because it's a legacy. It's oftentimes a family-owned business. They've been doing it for years. And, the stress and pressure of wanting to maintain that, and trying to deal with all the aspects of that. So it's a lot on the shoulders of our producers. It's a lot on their shoulders.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody back from where I grew up in Southern Illinois, and they were talking about that, the stress of keeping the family farm going because, they got that land, I don't know, a couple hundred years ago. I guess maybe that's an exaggeration. I don't know, but a long time ago. And trying to keep that farm profitable so that they can pass it on to their kids. It's a lot of stress there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It is. It's a lot to consider.
Knesha, can you talk a little bit about chronic illness and pain?
Absolutely. Our farmers, our ranchers, our producers, as I'm calling them, just to make myself clear, are, farming is a very physically intense, occupation. And so oftentimes, again, our farmers are dedicated, they're hardworking, and, they're going to get the job done. They're going to do whatever it takes. My stepdad is a farmer, and does soybean and cotton crop, and he will work, my mom says he's beating the sun up, to get outside and do work. So they're working and they're getting the job done, and they're not thinking about themselves, right? They're trying to just make sure that they finish that job. So the work of, the physical labor and doing kneeling and carrying heavy loads and repetitive motions, those can lead to a lot of chronic issues. Lower back pain is one. And I'm sure that the list is long depending on what actual, type of work that you're doing. If you're dealing with dairy, you're constantly kneeling, and lots of shoulder and neck injuries and wrist injuries, depending on, what your function is. So our farmers are often hard workers, and they're doing a lot of physical work, but they may not necessarily be strengthening the muscle chemicals associated with those said activities. And so, injury can often happen. And so it's very common. We actually just did a recent webinar on ergonomics, and it talked about just kind of, making sure that you're kind of using the right machinery or equipment, or using your body in an appropriate manner. And, oftentimes, again, we're just trying to work hard to get the job done. So injury does happen, and, making sure that we take time to nurse and address those injuries. But oftentimes, thinking about my stepdad again, he will just continue to work until it's unbearable. Yeah. And then he'll finally make his way into the doctor's office and see what we could do at that point. But, it's definitely a lot of pressure and stress trying to kind of put that physical load on your body each and every day. And injuries do happen.
Yeah, it takes its toll, doesn't it?
It does, absolutely.
So what about the lack of access to health services in rural areas?
It's a big concern. I mean, again, our rural areas, people are living there. We have obviously a less of a population, oftentimes less resources. Our providers, especially thinking about the area of mental health, there's actually, provider shortages all over the country, and it's definitely increased when you look at rural areas. So the need is there for mental health, for primary care, and those specifically who focus on rural medicine, who focus on the careers that are actually taking place, or the job aspects that are taking place in rural areas. Those are critical needs. And as of late, we've also been seeing more with maternal child, which is kind of an early passion of mine, with a lot of OB units in hospitals closing because they just can't sustain services. So lots of lack in those rural areas.
Yes, very much so. So a lot of our listening audience is made up of hospital administrators, providers, nurses, clinicians, community health workers, you name it, rural health workers working in rural health, I guess is the way to say that.
Absolutely.
So what do our listening audience, the rural health leaders that listen to this program, what do they need to be aware of as it pertains to the Total Farmer Health Initiative that you were talking about?
Absolutely. With the Total Farmer Health Initiative, we are early in the process of developing materials where we're going to be talking to those experts, such as themselves, who are working in agriculture, working in mental or behavioral health, who will just kind of help us create a toolkit of essentially virtual webinars that will be available for their use. There are kind of two things that are available right now, if not actually more. AgriSafe does have a mental health wellness resource, and it is for healthcare providers as well as the producers themselves that talk about warning signs. And it's also important because we've seen an increase in, just the unstableness of the ag economy, that we are listening, to people, asking, how they're doing, and not just accepting fine, but really asking them, how are they doing? Are they okay? So we really want to encourage those real life conversations. It's a couple of helplines that are out there focused on the issue of mental health and or specifically ag rural mental health, if you will. One is in the United States, the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. That phone number is 1-800-273-8255. Again, 1-800-273-8255. We say not only have that number, but put it in your cell phone. Have it readily available if you come across a person, if you're speaking to someone and they are expressing signs of despair, stress, anxiety, despair, have it available. It's a helpline, but it also can be a warm line if you're just having concerns and want to make sure that you're talking to a person, seeing where they are, and trying to get them connected to resources. And the same is Farm Aid actually has a helpline as well. Their number is 1-800-FARM-AID, 1-800-327-6243. That's another helpline that gets hundreds of calls especially dealing with, the unstableness of the ag economy and farm-related stress. So those numbers are available, but we really want to encourage our administrators to have those candid conversations. If you see something, really encourage kind of digging a little deeper and taking the time to try to connect them to resources like these that are available.
That's great. I will make sure that we put those phone numbers and any other links you might have that you'd like for us to share. I'll make sure we put those in the show notes on our website with your episode here. So our listeners, if you want to get those, go to the show notes on our webpage. So, Knesha, thanks for sharing that information. You've got a vast experience in working in rural health and in agriculture, a very robust background in that area. So what scares you the most about the future of rural?
About the future of rural, it's really two areas that are of concern. Right now, again, in 2018, 2019, we're seeing lots of stories in the media about these hospital closures, these OB closures specifically.
Yes.
Again, you're in rural. We have 4 million babies being born every year in this country, and a number of those are coming from rural areas. So maternity deserts, places that are closing those OB units, and you have pregnant women who have, generally healthy pregnancies. You have a lot of high-risk cases who are in rural areas, and to close a hospital with an OB unit, now they're going to have to get even further, let alone if there's an issue with that newborn child. So, that's really concerning me. That's a huge challenge. And we're seeing about 5 million women in our country actually live in maternity care deserts. So this is a huge growing issue because this is the beginning of life, and we want to make sure that we have as many resources available as possible to help, prevent any future issues.
Yes.
And then secondly, we've talked about it throughout this show today, is the rates of farmer suicide, the rates of not only suicides, but just the rates of hopelessness, stress, anxiety, depression. There's a story I recently read, and a farmer was saying when he heard about, I think it was the 2016 stats that came out from the CDC about the increased rate of farmer suicide that has been adjusted, but we know it's still a reality. And his statement was, I've thought about suicide every day for 25 years.
Gosh.
That's tough. That's and I can't even imagine. So this is a cry out for help. We've known farming is a tough occupation, but they have some of the hardest working, most dedicated people, and we have to find a response to this. There are solutions out there. We have to find funding. We have to find, and we're trying to connect the dots for resources, but there's a lot that is needed, and we as a country, I believe we can do better. So that scares me. That scares me to know that this has been going on for years, and we're just not investing the way that we could in people who give so much to us. Yes.
Yep. That is scary. Well, let me flip that question around. What excites you the most about the future of rural?
The opportunity, rural, again, that those communities are resilient, that bond and the power of community is still inspiring. Those small towns and the way they come together, it just is very nostalgic for me, and I love seeing it. And we are, using technology in new ways. So telemedicine is huge, and we've been able to do that. AgriSafe does a lot through webinars, and so we're trying to connect with people who may have difficulties getting to, conferences. We're trying to meet people where they are. And so there's just a lot of opportunity there. So we know that the tide is changing, that power of community exists. And so we have very strong people who are capable of helping, and we're trying to be those connections. So that's very inspiring.
Yes, it is inspiring, and there's a ton of innovation taking place in rural America, and it's because of what you're talking about, the resilience and the tide that's changing and all that. Well, it's hard to believe that how the time has flown by, Knesha. We've talked about quite a few different things. If our listeners only take one thing away from our conversation today, what should that be?
I would just say, first of all, just thank you. Thank you for all of those who are serving people in rural health, in public health, in nursing, in any field that is touching our people who are feeding our world, who are providing our food, fuel, and fiber. So just want them to know that, you are appreciated. We hope that AgriSafe can be a resource and a connector for any of your areas of need. And we welcome you to stay connected with us through our website at agrisafe.org, our social media pages at AgriSafe on Facebook, Twitter, and also LinkedIn. So just thank you for your time and continue to do what you do. We appreciate it.
Knesha Rose-Davison, Health Communications Director at AgriSafe. Thank you again for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Bill. I really appreciate speaking with you today.
Well, I appreciate you sharing all your knowledge and expertise about the AgriSafe philosophies and programs that are going on to take care of our rural Americans that are working in agriculture. And I want to thank everybody out there for listening today. If you enjoyed today's episode, please go to iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, whatever your favorite podcast app might be, and subscribe to Rural Health Leadership Radio. And while you're on Facebook today, we'd also appreciate a like on Rural Health Leadership Radio's Facebook page. Yes, we have a Facebook page, and we love likes. Until next week, let's keep working to improve rural health, one conversation at a time.
If you would like to connect with today's guest, please send an email with your contact information to bill@billoxier.com. If you would like to be a guest or suggest someone else as a guest, have a question you would like to ask, or simply want to contact Rural Health Leadership Radio, please use that same email address, bill@billoxier.com. That's BILL@BILLAUXIER.com. You can also visit our website at www.rhlradio.com.
And we'd ask that you please support our sponsor, the Dynamic Leadership Academy for Rural Health. The Dynamic Leadership Academy for Rural Health's mission is to improve rural health, one leader at a time.